I want you to take a moment right now, just wherever you are. I want you to imagine you're walking.
Mm-hmm.
You're moving very slowly through a shaded, arcaded walkway. You're in a desert oasis city, and it's dusk.
That perfect time of day.
Yeah, exactly. The intense, punishing heat of the day has finally begun to release its grip. You can feel it radiating softly upward from the smooth, worn stones beneath your feet.
Just a gentle warmth.
Right. And as you walk, you start to notice what your eye, your ear, and your skin are quietly revealing to you. The lines of the buildings around you, they don't aggressively cut into the twilight sky, they curve. They sweep alongside it, almost as if the wind itself had carved them over thousands of years.
Beautiful.
And the sound you hear isn't the chaotic roar of traffic. It's not the heavy hum of massive generators. It's just this gentle, rhythmic trickle of water. It's perfectly calibrated to blend with the low, distant whisper of shifting sand. There are no towering monuments here. There are no glowing signs fighting for your attention. There's only a profound, breathtaking stillness. You are walking through a civilization that exists in a state of absolute reverent balance.
It's a remarkable space to inhabit, isn't it? Even just in the mind.
It really is.
Because the atmosphere you're describing, it's not some happy accident of nature. It's a highly deliberate, deeply philosophical design. And today, our mission in this deep dive is to explore exactly how an entire civilization shapes its physical space, its art, and its very sound in perfect alignment with its world.
We're drawing upon a really specific archival record today. It's known as PDS 011.
Right.
You can think of it almost like a thoughtful curator's field chronicle. It's a detailed observation of the architecture, the urban planning, the art, and the expression of a people known as the Antaran.
And I think before we get into the physical structures themselves, we probably need just a tiny bit of scaffolding, just for context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who are the Antarans and why do they build like this? Because from what I'm looking at in the records, their entire approach to existence is just so deeply tied to the specific planet they live on.
That's exactly right. So the Antarana live on a planet called Antares. It is an arid, incredibly harsh world, but it is sustained by a deep planetary core energy that they refer to as the flame. Now, if we look back at some of the earlier contextual records, we know that long ago, this society learned a really painful existential lesson about the hubristic collapse of their ancestors.
They saw what happens when a culture tries to dominate its environment.
Exactly. When you try to dominate rather than live within it, things fall apart. So because of that historical trauma, their entire modern society is governed by a strict doctrine of equilibrium.
They had to adapt to survive.
Yes. Over generations, they've achieved this deep environmental integration. It's an actual physiological attunement to extreme heat and sparse water. And that attunement dictates everything they build and everything they are.
Which brings us to the core hook of our deep dive today. For you and me, living in our modern human cities, building something or creating a piece of art is almost always about leaving a permanent mark on the universe.
We want to be remembered.
Right. We carve our names in granite. We build colossal skyscrapers that defy gravity and just, shout our existence into the sky. But for the Antarana, creation isn't about imposing a legacy at all. It's about gracefully, quietly blending into the background. So, okay, let's unpack this, starting with how they approach the built environment itself.
The architecture.
Yeah. In their culture, architecture isn't seen as an imposition upon the landscape. It's an intentional continuation of it. The buildings literally seem to emerge from the sand.
They do, and it's a vital distinction. When an Antaran structure is conceived, it isn't dropped onto the land from some abstract blueprint in an office somewhere.
Right.
It is designed using local stone. They use highly durable composite structures and this fascinating regenerative form of adobe. Form follows environment in the strictest, most literal sense.
They just rise so modestly from the ground.
Yes. You simply will not find the massive monumentality that defines human history. There are no towering pyramids, no glass and steel monoliths scraping the sky.
Because to them, an enormous monument isn't a sign of greatness.
No, not at all. Or societal progress. To the Antarana, a massive monument is a symptom of past arrogance. They view it as an aggressive act against the horizon.
An aggressive act against the horizon.
Wow. Instead, their structures are born from the earth and are designed to eventually return to it without leaving a toxic scar.
But if they aren't building these massive fortified walls to fight off the harsh desert elements, how on earth do these adobe structures survive the heat and the sandstorms without just blowing away or crumbling?
It all comes down to passive integration. The forms of their buildings follow the natural lines of the dunes. They follow the ancient rock formations. Their shapes are dictated by the prevailing wind directions and the precise light conditions of the Antaran suns.
So they aren't resisting the wind.
Exactly. Rather than building a flat wall that takes the full brunt of a sandstorm, they build sweeping curves. This allows the abrasive wind to flow smoothly over and around the structure.
And what about the heat?
They achieve passive cooling not by forcing energy-heavy air conditioning through metal ducts, but through sheer wall thickness and the brilliant utilization of thermal mass.
Right, because thermal mass absorbs the intense heat during the day, which keeps the inside cool. And then it slowly radiates that stored warmth during the freezing desert nights.
Precisely. And they combine that with exact spatial orientation to capture whatever microscopic moisture the desert air happens to hold.
That is just brilliant.
Think about walking down a street in our world. We're flanked by glass boxes in the middle of a desert, and we expend massive amounts of energy blasting AC just to make them livable.
Yeah, we fight the climate constantly.
We build fragile structures in flood zones and then pour millions of tons of concrete to build walls to fight the water. The Antaran approach flips that entirely. For them, true durability arises from adaptation, not from size, and certainly not from resistance.
It just completely shifts how you think about a city, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that philosophy extends all the way from a single dwelling to the layout of their entire civilization.
It scales up perfectly.
It really does. Let's look at the anatomy of these oasis cities as described in PDS 011. It is urban planning completely stripped of the desire for dominance. The settlements are remarkably compact.
Yes, very dense but low to the ground.
Right, they're low-rise clusters that intimately hug the vital, sparse water sources scattered across the arid surface of Antares.
And notice the precise geometry of that layout, too. The cities are organized radially or concentrically. They ripple outward from central water features and from the subtle, localized influence zones of the planetary flame.
When you say the flame's influence zones, what does that actually look like on the ground? Are we talking about visible fire or like geothermal vents?
It's much more subtle than that. The flame isn't literal fire, it's a deep core resonance. It creates localized zones of gentle geothermal warmth and subtle magnetic harmonies that the Antarana can physically feel in their bodies.
Oh, so it's a physiological connection.
Yes. They orient their growth around these zones like a family gathering around a quiet hearth. When you look at their street grid, you don't see the rigid, right-angled blocks that define our modern urban planning.
There's no grid system.
No, streets don't cut against the environment. They curve seamlessly, following the ancient pathways of the prevailing winds. The entire city acts as a funnel for cooling breezes and a shield against sandstorms, purely by virtue of its aerodynamic layout.
And the centers of these cities are so fundamentally different from ours. In a human city, the center is almost always dominated by a symbol of absolute power.
A massive government building.
Yeah, or a towering corporate headquarters or a colossal cathedral. But in Antaran urban planning, no single building is permitted to claim absolute centrality or hierarchical display.
That absence of dominance is very intentional. The centers of Antaran cities are open spaces dedicated to exchange, to quiet learning, and to communal action. They are never designed for the exercise of power.
It's a gathering space, not a throne room.
Exactly, and this relates directly to the life cycle of the buildings themselves, because there's no need to project dominance, there's no need to build permanent fortresses or unyielding stone castles.
They don't need to look intimidating.
Right. Their buildings are modular, they're infinitely repairable. In Antaran culture, the demolition of a structure is considered an absolute last resort.
It's seen as a failure of foresight, right?
Yes, a failure of imagination. Instead, a building evolves. Its worn, sand-blasted parts are simply replaced with more regenerative adobe. It constantly adapts to the changing needs of the family or the community without ever needing to be violently torn down.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. What happens when you step out of your private dwelling and into their public spaces? Because this is where you can actually feel the culture's mindset on your skin.
The transitional zones.
Yes, these transitional spaces are designed specifically for quiet interaction. It's their concept of equilibrium made tangible. You walk from your home into these shaded communal courtyards. You move through softly arcing walkways and into amphitheater-like gathering terraces that are literally stepped into the natural slopes of the land.
Everything is calibrated. Every single dwelling is oriented with incredible care to balance the need for deep restorative privacy with the communal rhythm of the city.
And the role of water and shadow in these spaces cannot be overstated. Shaded passages naturally encourage a slower pace of walking.
It changes your physical rhythm.
Yeah, a quieter, more measured tone of conversation. And the water features are engineered with stunning acoustic precision.
I loved reading about that section of the archive.
Right. They don't have massive, roaring fountains shooting water 50 feet into the air.
No, not at all. A gentle trickle of water is routed through carved stone to create a highly localized soundscape. It serves a dual purpose.
It's so clever.
The specific frequency of the trickling water actually masks private conversations from those nearby, ensuring intimacy while simultaneously fostering a sense of shared, peaceful presence.
So you can sit there entirely alone with your thoughts or quietly speaking with a companion, yet you remain deeply connected to the ambient life of the oasis.
It perfectly balances the individual with the collective.
And what you don't see in these public squares is just as important as what you do see. There is a total lack of permanent symbolism.
No statues.
Right. If you think about walking through a human capital, you're constantly looking up at statues of great conquerors on horseback. You see demonstrative insignia carved into archways to remind you exactly who was in charge, whose wealth built the plaza, or what war was won there.
Constantly demanding your reverence.
Yes. In the oasis cities, these spaces are deliberately empty of all of that. But it's not a cold, sterile emptiness. It's an emptiness that actively invites reflection.
It breathes.
It leaves room for you, the individual, to simply exist in the present moment without the heavy weight of history or political propaganda pressing down on your shoulders.
Which brings us to how they express themselves in that present moment. Because art in Antaran culture is approached very differently than we might expect. They entirely reject the static.
Art isn't a fixed object.
No. Art is treated as a dynamic living process rather than an object to be possessed. It's not something you buy, frame, and hoard in a climate-controlled vault to appreciate and value.
It's fleeting.
Yes. It is something to be experienced in the ephemeral moment of its creation.
The visual arts are a perfect example of this. When they create visual motifs, they don't use harsh, unnatural pigments engineered to resist the elements for centuries.
They use the environment.
Their art relies heavily on the interplay of light and shadow throughout the day, on the movement of the wind, and on the careful arrangement of natural materials.
And the colors are highly restrained.
Very subtle. According to the records, they actually believe that excessive visual contrast disrupts inner balance.
That makes perfect sense given their philosophy.
And crucially, and this is the part that I find so incredibly beautiful, visual art is allowed to fade. It's allowed to gently erode back into the sand.
It's impermanent by design.
Sometimes it's deliberately left unfinished, just as a quiet acknowledgement that nothing in the universe is ever truly static or complete.
That same principle applies deeply to their soundscape, too. The profound role of music in Antaran society is tied directly to the environment itself.
It's not like a classical symphony.
Not at all. Their music isn't built from rigidly fixed scores played on mechanical manufactured instruments. It's built from breath, from physical resonance, and from environmental harmonics.
So they use the sound of the world around them.
Yes. When they perform, they capture and harmonize with the sounds of the wind moving through the arcades, the whispering flow of the sand dunes, and those deep, almost sub-audible planetary vibrations of the flame. It is a tonal, rhythmic, and continuously flowing language of sound.
And from what the field chroniclers note, it's almost never a solo performance. There's no elevated stage where one genius stands in the spotlight while everyone else sits in the dark and watches in silence.
It's participatory.
Yeah, joint music making is a fundamental tool for their society. It's how they maintain social coherence and emotional balance. And silence, this is vital to understand, silence is considered an integral, active part of the music.
It isn't just a pause.
Exactly. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the canvas that the sound is painted on.
This aesthetic philosophy permeates absolutely everything they do. Even everyday, mundane gestures carry a profound aesthetic weight.
How so?
Well, the way they walk, the way they move their bodies during simple chores, sweeping the sand from a courtyard, drawing water, is carefully calibrated to their breath and pulse.
So even sweeping is an art form.
Yes, they move with an economy of energy and a quiet grace that is almost like a dance. But notably, this everyday artistry is entirely free from any signature of individual authorship.
Nobody is signing their name to the sweeping of the courtyard.
Exactly. No one claims credit for a beautifully executed daily task. It is simply the way one lives when one is fully physiologically attuned to the rhythms of the world.
It really makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? I look at all this, the fading art, the unauthored chores, the buildings made of sand, and I just marvel at a society that deliberately chooses impermanence.
It goes against so much of human instinct.
Why choose to build softly? Why sing softly? Why deliberately choose to fade away instead of fighting to stand the test of time?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, if we look closely at the archival data and the broader philosophy of their culture, the answer reveals their absolute core truth.
Which is?
They consciously, purposefully privilege restraint, transience, and environmental integration over monumentality and permanence. They do this because they've come to understand something fundamental about the universe.
That resisting time is futile.
Precisely. True continuity arises not from resisting time and entropy, but from moving in perfect alignment with them. Rejection of towering permanence is not a surrender, it's a profound adaptation.
It's bending like a reed in the wind instead of snapping like an oak tree.
Yes, it allows their forms to weather gracefully. It allows their creations to be reabsorbed by time rather than shattered by it. A glass tower will eventually shatter. An adobe curve will simply melt back into the dune.
It's a survival strategy that looks like poetry.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and it serves a very practical macro-level purpose as well. By building softly and fading quietly, they achieve protection through inconspicuousness.
Oh, from outsiders.
Yes. To other species or travelers passing through this region of space, Antaran cities often appear remarkably quiet. They look alien or simply inconspicuous, almost invisible if you don't know what to look for.
They camouflage their entire civilization.
It's a highly intentional defense mechanism. By not presenting a loud, dominant, monumental culture, they protect themselves against the cultural overlay, the envy, and the dominance of younger, more aggressive species. They survive by simply not offering a target.
So what does this all mean for us? When you take a step back from PDF 011 and you look at the entirety of Antaran architecture, urban planning, and art, you see the quiet, undeniable logic of a culture that has completely mastered its own ego.
They've let go of the need to shout.
It's a world where form arises exclusively from function. Expression arises purely from necessity, and true beauty arises only from balance.
Nothing is wasted.
Nothing is random, and yet nothing is rigid, nothing is superfluous. They've built a society that literally breathes in and out with the planet itself.
It's a powerful testament to the idea that the highest form of civilization might not be the one that conquers nature, but the one that realizes it's an inseparable part of it.
The Antarana don't scream their existence into the void, they whisper it.
And because they whisper, they are able to hear everything else.
It's an incredible thought. And I want to leave you, our listener, with one final new paradigm to mull over as you go back to your day, surrounded by the concretes, the glass, and the constant noise of our world. Or think about our modern obsession with digital permanence. We back up every single photo, every text message, every fleeting thought to the cloud.
We hoard data.
We do. We build massive, energy-hungry server farms in the desert just to ensure that we never, ever forget a single gigabyte of our past. We are terrified of digital decay.
We are.
But what if we took a lesson from the Antarana? What would a digital forgetting look like? Imagine if we designed our technology, our digital footprints, or even our AI memories to serve their purpose perfectly in the moment we need them.
And then let them go.
And then, like an unfinished painting in the desert wind, we allow them to gracefully, quietly disappear.